I'm streaming. I will tell you when. Okay, that worked. Welcome everyone to Climate Chat. I'm your host, Dan Miller. Today we have a very special guest, Adam McKay. And we're going to be talking about, is climate change funny? And other topics related to climate communication and climate engagement. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you please to subscribe and like the show so that others hear it, because again, we're trying to get more people engaged on climate, and this is a great way to do it. Also, just two quick notes. Upcoming at a special day and time on this Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Our guest is going to be David Keith, who is at the University of Chicago and is sort of the lead person on climate intervention. And that includes geoengineering and all the carbon capture, all those kinds of things. He's very well known for that. And so we're going to be speaking with him again, special day and time, Tuesday at 9. And next Sunday at 10 a.m., our regular time, we're going to have Ken Berlin, who used to run the Climate Reality Project for Al Gore and is now at the Atlantic Council, a think tank on energy and climate. So that's a little bit of that, but out of the way. And so, Adam, I'd like to welcome you. I think most people listening to this show know who you are, but maybe you could start off by giving us a little bit of your background, which I find fascinating, by the way. So welcome.
Of course. Well, I started really doing stand-up comedy in Philadelphia in the 80s, but then found myself connecting to a really interesting theatrical form in Chicago called long-form improv. And it was taught by this guy named Del Close. And that was kind of a life-changing experience for me because he's a guy who taught like Mike Myers, Gilda Radner, John Candy, all these incredible people. And he really had specific theories about how to interact with an audience. So after that, I went to Saturday Night Live, where I became head writer, spent a bunch of years, sort of head writing on that show. And then I was ready to do film. And Will Ferrell and I did a bunch of big, broad comedies. Anchorman was the first film I ever directed, co-wrote. And then later, there was a really interesting, by the way, throughout all of this, I've always been an activist. I grew up in the 70s, fairly, single mom, food stamps, all that kind of stuff. So I was brought up to believe in activism, the left. So that's always been a part of what I've done. And then we started making movies. And even though they were big, silly comedies, there was always a little, kind of thing we were pushing. The idea of Anchorman was that the news has become like, shaking jello with a pretty, fruit in the middle of it. And around the time that I made The Big Short, I started realizing you can't bury your meaning anymore. We are in such a critical time that we've got to start presenting this stuff nakedly, because clearly there's a divide between a popular audience and the critic audience. And that really kind of hit its peak with Vice, a movie we did with the explicit goal of why did we never come to terms with the horrors of the Iraq invasion that killed, by some estimates, 1 million people, shattered the Geneva Convention, and a million other things. And during that, because we were doing so much deep dive research into Cheney, I discovered that he was instrumental in that White House with killing any kind of action on climate. That W. Bush, in his kind of naive way, was like, yeah, of course. And he was thwarted by Cheney and manipulated. So I started looking into, like, well, what does that mean? One of the fun things about making movies, TV shows, producing, is you can deep dive all these subjects. And I'm a guy who loves to inhale everything I can. And when I went into climate, I kept looking for the moment where the data would tell me that, yeah, it's 50 years away, it's 100 years away, and I could never find it. And I started almost getting frantic, reaching out to scientists. Once again, one of the benefits of Hollywood is, people will return your calls. And the more I asked, the deeper the hole got. And it culminated with 3 nights where I could not sleep. And my wife was like, what's wrong? I'm a great sleeper. I mean, if there were an Olympics of sleeping, I would at least get a bronze. And from that point on, I started talking to climate journalists, constantly scientists, activists, and everything I learned was that it's way worse than we know and way more urgent. So as a result of that, I ended up coming here to Ireland, and I wrote Don't Look Up in about a month. It poured out of me. And we made that movie. And really, after that movie, my life has never been the same. I mean, from the global reaction that we got, from the kind of sneering, critical reaction that we got, I learned so much about what the current state of our culture, our incentives, our politics are. Regardless, by the way, feel free not to like the movie. I don't really care about that. But the reaction was so instructive. So at the end of it, I talked to my associate producer, Stacey Robert Steele, and I'm like, Stacey, I think this is everything. And she was like, yeah, I think you're right. And Stacey's a very grounded person. And so when she said that, we went all in on Yellow Dot Studios, which is the non-for-profit that we run that is really dedicated to attacking the forces that are doing this to our future. And we realized in the non-for-profit world, a lot of what was going on was big money was coming in, softening the message. So very early on with Yellow Dot, I told Stacey, I was like, don't do that. There's no reason for this to exist if we're going to soften the truth and pretend that these kind of incremental actions are really addressing the moment we're in. And to end on a happy note with this kind of story, it's been incredible. I mean, the Yellow Dot team is amazing. the people we've met, the energy we've tapped into, there is something so powerful about just saying the truth that it doesn't compare to anything. So I am very happy with everything we've been doing. It's not perfect. We will miss, we will hit, but the intention is always there.
Well, it's great. Well, a whole bunch of questions for you regarding some of that. But first of all, I just want to explain to everybody, Yellow Dot Studios is a new nonprofit production company that you've created, which I believe focuses on short form videos for things like social media and all about the, engaging people on the climate emergency. Is that a fair way to sum up what Yellow Dot is?
Yeah, I think what typifies Yellow Dot is we don't hold back on anger, blame, aggression. I mean, these are vital components to the climate movement. And what we discovered when we got into the space of nonprofit climate was a lot of, very passive, compliant energy, because the billionaires who are giving the money, they don't really want change. They want to give their money and feel good about it. And so very early on, we made the choice like, no. And it's been really cool because other non-for-profits have followed us with our aggression at the oil companies, the lobbyists, the media. And yeah, it really fits with our overall philosophy, which is just, I think it's, what's her name? Hannah Arendt, who says, she's studied fascism, wrote a bunch of great stuff. And she said, in a fascistic or restricted society, simply nakedly saying the truth is a revolutionary act. So when I saw that quote, someone posted it, I sent it to all of Yellow Dot, and I was like, yes. Is someone correcting my horribly paraphrased quote?
Well, I don't know about that, but
Sure
I want to get back. I want to get to that, by the way, because that's a key. So on Climate Chat, we talk about climate science, we talk about climate solutions, but we talk a lot about how to communicate about climate, because we actually know enough about climate science and climate solutions to do what we need to do, but we're not doing it. So I think what you're focused on is actually the key. And I want to get back to that, but I want to get back to Don't Look Up. And just for the three people out there that might not know what it's a movie about a comet coming to hit the Earth, and the media doesn't react. The politicians don't react, even though it's a real emergency. And it's an allegory for climate change. I understand at one point it was the third most watched movie on Netflix. So, in terms of viewership, did great. Do you have any information on sort of the impact it had in terms of engaging people in climate, or do you have any feel for that at all?
Yeah, it was one of the strangest releases I have ever experienced. I mean, from doing comedies, you always know that, Don't Look Up was made to be an over the top farcical comedy with a grim ending, which is how I see what we're doing with climate. But it was really dramatic, the response we got, which was brutal from the critic kind of film world. But once it went to the world, because the reason we made the movie at Netflix was that they have a global distribution network, and I have never seen anything like it. We're the second most viewed film in Netflix history. We were number one in 82 countries, which for anyone who knows anything about comedy, that is very rare. Comedy is extremely culturally sensitive. And but then the craziest thing was when the popular response came, there were tons of climate activists, climate scientists that were pushing back against the critics. And it turned into this kind of war on social media. And it culminated with one of the film critics at the New Yorker saying, well, these toxic climate scientists. And it was wild, man. I mean, once again, every film you release, you learn about what's going on. And I have never learned as much as from that film. And the second thing that happened was clearly we made the movie about how our news media and governments are ignoring climate breakdown. But what I learned was that the gaslighting was happening against, across all levels. Brazil loved the movie and they connected it to, at the time, their right-wing corrupt president. Like, it was number one in Pakistan, it was number one in Nigeria. And we realized, oh crap, yeah, we're all being gaslit. So, and then in the very end, Netflix actually did a deep dive, statistical, like really deep dive, statistical study on the effect the movie had. And I was shocked. It was crazy. It was like, if you went into the movie knowing that climate was a problem, your urgency went up something like 20%. If you went in denying climate, your denial went down something like 11%. But then here was the part that was really interesting. If people engaged with the materials we had included with the film, because we had a website, we were doing,
Right.
then the numbers shot through the roof. Then it was like deniers went to something like 28%. The people that believed it but weren't urgent went up like 45%. So when we got that info, we immediately said to Netflix, like, please release this publicly. But it was more for their in-house kind of understanding. So,
Oh, you mean the numbers? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but the greatest moment was, I think a month after the movie came out, there were street protests across France. I think they said the number was like 300,000 people. And ever since then, Don't Look Up has become a kind of term for government
That's
media
right.
gaslighting us. So
You created a meme.
I mean, the whole thing was incredible. It was surprising. Upsetting, beautiful. When what's his name from the UK, Monbiot, wrote a piece saying how the movie brought him to tears. I started crying when I read that, because for those of us that have lived in this kind of gaslight condition, to see it on a screen was, for me, it was really emotional making it, but the reaction was incredible. And the headline is, the people know. They really know. And that's a huge thing.
Now, one thing I'm sure you've seen, and I just found it amazing. There was someone took your film and took some scenes out of it, and then placed some real interviews with real climate activists, like in the UK, like the Just Stop Oil people. And you could not tell which was the movie and which was real life. They were asking this woman about the dress she was wearing, and it was like, just like, and that was the real one. It was really amazing. So I think you you certainly hit a nerve there. And of course, everybody, we're obviously involved in the climate community here. All the scientists, all the advocates, they all saw their life and Don't Look Up and the reaction they get to the work they're doing. So first of all, just
Yeah, I mean,
congratulations.
ultimately, it's just a movie. So it's a little bit of a push. It's nothing like these activists are doing. It's nothing like the scientists are doing. But what was cool about it was a rare situation where you got to see this global release distribution system, Netflix, that has never existed before. And that was the part that really got me, was like, oh my God, we're number one in Tunisia. Like, we're number one in Vietnam. We're number one in Kansas. And and then they did a study on the social media responses, and it was 11-1 positive. People were like, I feel seen. This is what I live with. So, yeah, it was really cool because it came out of my freak out about what's going on with the climate, and then to see that other people felt that feeling.
So you kind of hit on this a little bit in some of your previous comments, but you established Yellow Dot Studios to make more media about the climate emergency, and you actually focused a lot on humor, which goes to your background at Saturday Night Live and the funny films that you made. How do you see humor helping to engage people on climate, and is climate change funny, which is the title of the room? I guess you can answer either or both of those.
So there is an incredible book. I'm trying to remember the writer. Gonzalez is his last name. And I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's called Extreme Survival. But anyway, this guy, if you Google Gonzalez survival, it will come up. And he chose to study, why do people live through extreme circumstances like being lost at sea, being lost in the woods, and like five other kind of circumstances. And one of the big things that he really discovered was that keeping your sense of humor means you are not overwhelmed by the circumstance. So I remember reading that book about 5 years ago, when I was really experiencing a serious degree of climate panic, and realizing
Okay.
he's right. We have to laugh. And that's why we made Don't Look Up a popular, over the top comedy.
Okay. By the way, another TV show that you worked on, people might not be aware, but you were a writer and at least partial writer, producer, partial writer, and partial director for Secession, which is all about the media empire. Did you learn anything from Secession that gave you insight into the media's, let's admit it, failure to communicate about climate? Of course, that's also what Don't Look Up's about, but any additional insight from Secession and looking into that? Oh, you're frozen there, Adam. Oh, we lost you on video. Let's see. You might have to reconnect, Adam. We can edit it out later, but for those who are live, you're seeing that things go live. So, Adam, I think you need to reconnect if you can hear me.
Dan, Nicole sent you her
Yeah.
number, I believe.
Nicole, yeah. Let's see.
If you needed to reach him.
I can do that here. I have Nicole here, but
He's
There
back.
he is.
there we go. Whoops.
But you need to do
Is
the
he back?
things again.
Adam, are you back?
Hello, it said he was back.
Adam, we're not hearing you. Let's see.
It says he joined as a guest.
Oh, he's a separate person? I got it. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Let me make you co-host. Okay. Adam, you should be able to unmute and come online again.
Here we go. We good?
There we go. We're back.
We're back.
I forgot. Oh, no, you disappeared again on your video. And there's two of you here, but that's okay. As long as one of you is able to come onto video. There we go.
Sorry about that. What was your question, Dan?
Well, we're asking about Secession and whether you learned anything additional from being involved in the making of Secession that taught you anything about the media's failure to cover climate change. Even though, of course, Don't Look Up was all about that as well. I'm just wondering, was there anything additional that you learned from that process, from that program?
Yeah, you know, I was a executive producer. I directed the pilot. I helped cast the show, but I was not, well, although I gave notes on the writing, I was not a full writer. But I remember shooting that opening episode, and if you've seen it, it ends with the kid getting the watch, and then you show how the media is everywhere. And throughout the whole series, I kept thinking about the fact that we've never had a media like this, with this kind of power and reach and ability to seduce. So by the end of the show, and Jesse Armstrong can tell you this, I became very annoying because I kept saying, do a scene on the streets of New York where there's smoke in the air and they don't even talk about it. And by that point, the writer's room was like, oh, McKay with his climate. And then we finished the show, and 6 months later, New York City was flooded with smoke. And Jesse was like, oh, that would have been good. So
okay.
it probably matches with everyone on this Zoom's experience with climate, which is people think you're Nostradamus with your climate predictions, but it's actually really easy. I mean, at that point, I already knew the news media had been befouled by oil and dark money and banking. So yeah, it wasn't surprising.
It wasn't hard. Now, you've mentioned something earlier, which I think is really the essence of what's important about climate. You said, don't back down, be honest. We have like all these big debates about hope versus fear. And I say, well, forget that, just be honest, which of course is pretty scary. But can you talk a little bit more about that? That seems to be it seems to be an obvious thing, but it actually is a very controversial subject in the climate community about, there's folks, and we've had him on here, Michael Mann, who gives a kind of a positive, hey, if we only cut our emissions, everything will be fine. People criticize him for that. And then there's others, Kevin Anderson, who, gives a pretty honest and scary view of the world. Talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned it earlier, but please talk a little more about that.
I think that is a great question. And I think that question is really everything about the moment we're in. There are two key words that are absent from all of the mainstream climate discussion. And those two words are probability and risk. And if you look at it, I'm a mediocre poker player. And if you look at it like you're sitting at the table, you have, two aces, there's a third on the board, but there's also a same suited king and queen. And is there a half a percentage chance that your opponent has a royal flush? You make the bet, because what are the stakes? You lose money. But if the stakes are you literally break the planet for 10,000 years and the entire card room bursts into flames, you fold your hand. And the thing I've noticed in this, it's really been decades of this kind of corrupted professional sideways talk. It's really like liberal, moneyed liberal kind of equivocation, is that there is never any consideration of probability and risk. And the second you snap that lens onto the camera, your whole way of approaching everything changes. I mean, we know now that the AMOC, even though they told us that churning current wasn't in threat for 200-300 years, well, surprise, surprise. It's now in play for collapse now. And the Amazon rainforest, we have heard, even though scientists are afraid to say it out loud, we've heard that that's now in jeopardy of a state of collapse. Recently, there was, I don't know if you saw this, Dan, but like the carbon sinks, the state of our forest, and those are now a tipping point. The, Thwaites, ice shelf, ice glacier, the Antarctic, those are in play. Once again, we are throwing dice, where if we throw the dice and snake eyes come up, we're done for 10, 20,000 years. We have to hope that, couple 100,000 people survive at the poles. So once I dove into that, and huge shout out to Elliot Jacobson and
Is on the call right now.
Oh, I
He
love
was.
Elliot.
There he is.
It's so
There he is.
It's so funny.
He's here.
It's so funny that the big thing we were missing was probability and risk. And then I noticed Elliot kind of like pop up, because none of the mainstream media will do it, because the second you do, you're not taking oil money for advertising. You're not taking banking money for advertising. The government, I mean, like, probability and risk are the two key words to everything.
Although, when it comes to that, first of all, we if this was an airplane, you're going to put your child on it. We wouldn't put our child on if it had 1/100th the risk that climate change has. And for some reason, I don't exactly understand why, but we're happy to put all our children on the planet, of course, and with a risk of, I mean, even when the IPCC talks about, well, there's a 66% chance of staying under 1 point, which is not even true. But you're willing to take a third chance, and that's not even. I mean, of course, it's really far worse than that. So the idea of risk and uncertainty is not your friend. People think, oh well, we're not certain. We're total catastrophe. So there's all of that. But I guess I just want to. Yeah, go ahead.
Dan, we know what's warping that perspective, and this is the part I find really funny, which is you have hundreds of millions of billions of dollars, you have awards, you have great positions. Oh my God, I'm head of editorial at the New York Times, that all point towards don't look at reality. And the next project I'm working on is all about, the movie Death of Stalin is really a great movie to watch because it shows how warped incentives can create a warped reality. And if you look at CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC, the Washington Post is a disaster. It's all warped incentives with no connection to the reality we're in. And that's very funny, but also murderous.
Murderous, and funny. And so, I'm going to open it up for questions here just in a moment. But when you do a poll of Americans, vast majority say they're concerned about climate change, and actually, vast majority say they'd like action on climate change. But when it comes to voting or other things, nowhere to be seen. Very low percentages of engagement. Any suggestion for people listening to this program about what they can do? I guess one, they could donate to Yellow Dot Studios. That's one thing they could do.
Yeah,
but any other thoughts or suggestions for them or the media or anything?
It's really, I think we're into addiction mindset at this point. We know that one of the most powerful forces for advertising agencies, governments, companies is brand loyalty. It is the hardest thing to break. And there's an incredible story from Target when they were going to launch their company, and they were obviously going against Walmart, and they were like, what do we do? And there's only 2 points that people switch their brand loyalty: when they're kids, they choose it. And the second is when mothers are pregnant. So they created this algorithm of advertising that could comb through your emails, your searches, and they could actually tell if a woman was pregnant before she even
That's right. Knew.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard this story, Dan?
I heard it, yeah. But I've heard about that.
Yeah. And the end result was Target was launched. Well, this was almost 20 years ago. They are so much more advanced. So the key is anger, laughter, absurdity. Screw all that bullshit. I'm an individual. And if we can all do that, we really can. I don't know if we can fix it, but we can, make choices, which is a much more mentally healthy place to be.
Okay. Hey, I'd like to open it up to others. First, going to start with our co-mod Stacy, and she also might have some other chat questions for you. For everyone asking questions, I ask you to keep them brief, like 30 seconds or so, and so we can keep this focused on Adam's responses. Stacy, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here.
I guess climate change is funny.
It's hilarious. I can't do it. I had to try. Yeah. So, Adam, do you think you could get Ricky Bobby to stop driving? Or perhaps switch to electric?
Ricky is a loose cannon, as we all know from Talladega Nights. He actually wants the gasoline in his car to emit more smog, chemicals, CO2. So he's currently talking about an engine that burns diapers, which I'm like, Ricky. So we're working on it.
Okay, yeah, that's at the top. Although that sounds a little true to life. And then, do you regret filming Anchorman when you should have filmed Weatherman?
No.
These are really hard-hitting questions, Stacey.
Yeah, hey, that's what I'm here for. Was it a missed opportunity to not do the yellow dot work under Funny or Die?
No,
If people
because
don't know, you did Funny or Die as well, by the way. That's an interesting thing.
Well, one of the reasons I left Funny or Die was, I had a great experience with it, amazingly creative people, but my one thing I always told them was don't work with super creepy corporations. And someone called me one day and they had done a series of funny videos for Chevron. And so I had to call them and say, I'm not a part of this. And so Funny or Die was cool. We did some really good stuff. But ultimately, they didn't seem to totally get the situation we're in.
Okay.
Last one, would you consider doing a series with me between two wind turbines?
Done.
Great. Okay, it's a deal. Thanks. I'll be back with
do you have a question
later.
Okay.
Yeah. So first off, just compliments on all your work. It's fantastic. And we grew up in similar circumstances. I right now we live in challenging times, and I'm wondering if anything has come to your attention in terms of like really sophisticated campaigns that test and refine things out at a whole bunch of different levels for a whole bunch of different purposes. Like, there's the task of getting people who are not aware, get the task of getting people who are aware to take action and make changes. There's, of course, the election, which can be pivotal or devastating depending on how it turns out. And, there are lots of things to do around that. And I mean, I really think that we need to be, 10 times more sophisticated and organized than, all of the disinfo op. And of course, comedy can have a really important role in that. So I would like to hear your thoughts and observations.
Yeah, comedy is a huge part of that. I mean, the story I always think of is there was a place, I think it was in northern Germany, where there was a well-known SS officer buried who had done untold horrors onto an innocent population. And about 10, 12 years ago, neo-Nazis started showing up to celebrate this horrible war criminal's life. And the town was like, what? This is crazy. And eventually, after 3 years, someone in the town came up with the great idea of every lap that they do around the grave will create a charity for the amount of laps that they do and will raise money for a good cause. And there are other stories like this where they would loop around and there would be a mocking trombone style band behind them. Nothing takes the air out of warped, corrupted point of view more than comedy. If they could fake it, they would. But comedy is one of the most accurate truth tellers. You can't make yourself laugh. You can snicker, you can smirk, you can, knowingly nod. But I'm always very suspicious of people that don't belly laugh. And I think that's really, the line that we're living on. Are you, you know, a snickerer, a smug smiler, or can you laugh? And fascists can't do that. Corporate sellouts can't do that. So I think like our whole movement to overturn this rotten system has to be ludicrous, aggressive, fearless, playful, sometimes very angry. But I think it goes against everything that got us into this situation, which is this kind of mealy compliance of this kind of C plus liberal fake smartness. Like it's time to let our humanity flex.
Very good. By the way, I don't think Trump can laugh very much, but that's a whole other thing. Leon Simons, so guest many times here. Welcome to Climate Chat. What's your question for Adam?
Hi, Adam. Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned risk and probability, and I wondered if you have any good jokes about that, or a way to communicate that. I remember in Don't Look Up, you covered I think Jonah Hill, the son of the president, when they were discussing the probability of the meteorite hitting the planet. He said so. Also, when they said it was 99 point something percent chance of hitting the Earth, he was like, "Oh, so it's not 100%. So that's good." So I remember that, but maybe you have more can elaborate more on the probability.
All
right. That's the world we're in, isn't it? Yeah.
Let me see if I can improvise a joke. All right. Two guys walk into a bar. The one guy says to the other, you know, there's a 99% chance this bar is about to be swallowed into a volcanic fissure. The other guy says, do they have gin and tonics for $3.99? The other guy says, yeah, I think so. The other guy says, let's go. I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe not the funniest joke, but it does get the point across that that's how we're thinking about it. We really are taking this serious.
I actually did write one joke a couple of years ago, and here it was. Three guys bust into a bathroom. They all have to urinate. It's in the middle of the day. And one guy, and there's only one stall. And one guy says, look, I'm a surgeon. I have to perform surgery on this child, brain surgery that only I can do in 45 minutes. Let me go. And the other guy says, well, I have to testify before Congress about this deep-rooted, you know, corruption that is damaging everyone. And the third guy says he takes down his fly, turns to the other two guys, urinates all over their legs, and says, I'm an investment banker. Not bad, right?
Okay, that came out of nowhere. That was great. Wow. Okay, Leon, anything else for Adam? That was pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to think more about the risk and probability, and indeed, because the risk now is, of course, close to 99%, because we are that we will have very serious climate change, and that we are not reducing greenhouse gas emissions rapidly enough to avoid many of the risks we are facing. So I think it's in a way. When you talked about risk and probability, my first thought was, is it really that is that the biggest problem? Because the risks are already very, very high, even even without even when we would magically reduce the CO2 emissions to zero tomorrow, which I call the instant human extinction scenario, which of course also won't happen.
So it's a great point from Leon, which is what even happens in the moment when we do wake up, which there will be somewhat of a moment of that. And the risk probability question is fighting warped and distorted incentives. And when we did the movie The Big Short, once again, I love to, inhale the kind of information. So I talked to all kinds of economists and reporters, and what I learned was it's all about befouled incentives. So I've said this before, but we're really up against the ants. When they go to look for food, they go everywhere, but they leave these little trails, these kind of scent trails. But when they find something good, like a dead beetle, they hit the scent trail with an extra thing that shoots back to the hive, and then all the ants go in that direction. That's entirely what we're dealing with. We're dealing with CEOs, representatives in government, people in media, and the people around them who have been warped by incentives. There's just no way a sane person would look at the probability and risk that we're confronting and go about their lives. It's been hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, in my day-to-day life, to deal with people that are filtering this moment through this warped, New York Times, CNN lens. I always wonder if the people that work there know the amount of damage they are doing. It's serious stuff. It's worthy of, like, storm the Bastille, really change your behavior. I'm lucky that I've been making movies for a while and that have enough of, a bank account, and people want to work with us because they make money from working with us, that I can just say what's going on. A lot of other people are in much more squeezed positions. But I would say, if this moment, if you really look at it, doesn't, hit you in the way that it's time to put everything on the line, there will be no other moment like this. It'll be too late. That was fun. That was funny.
That was funny. Thank you, Leon. We got a funny joke in there as well. Let's see. Eric, let me give you a chance to... Okay, you should be able to unmute and ask your brief question for Adam. Eric, welcome.
Hey, as I put it into the hold on.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just listening to this podcast, The Journal, and they're talking about Elon giving $40 million plus per month to Trump and the other rapacious billionaires club backing Trump. It almost seems like a parody right now that this group of rapacious billionaires seeming to want to acquire the federal government. Does there seem to be something to play off of there? That was my question. I'm Eric.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, when I started doing theater in the 80s, there was a theater director from Argentina named Augusto Boal. And his idea was that the theater can be aggressive, that it can challenge. And I think the last 40 years, you know, as economists call it, the great moderation has made us very compliant and very adverse to pain. But we're in the moment where it's time to lay it all on the line. So, you know, if you're wondering what to do, put your money towards disruptive activists, climate scientists that are speaking the truth, and be loud and clear with the people around you. If you want to give money to Yellow Dot, one thing I can tell you is we are not screwing around. Our studio is not about like a bunch of people making big salaries. We see that all over the place. But it's the time, right, Leon? Am I wrong?
Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I know this is a cause that is dear to you. You know, you have been very vocal about it, Adam. Breaking news: Biden dropped out.
Oh,
yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah,
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, so
that's good.
I know you've been thankful for that, and
well, I mean,
I guess they heard.
It was one of those situations where you're like, what are you doing? And it was very scary to see the amount of people that were going to follow that scent trail, to go back to the ant thing.
Wow.
So that's good. I mean, we're still going to need the... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm okay with TBD. Like as long as it's in that column, TBD was fine for me. And or Ghost of Mondale, also fine. It's like it's like you put anyone there. Like yeah, no, I'm shocked, and it's so interesting that you're here because I know you had been
breaking news live here on Climate Chat.
Yeah, that's actually legitimately good news, because he was in that debate, although the left wing was calling it out 2 years before and being kind of eye-rolled by the establishment media. But still, like, I mean, clearly the guy was not doing well. So any moment of our establishment taking in reality is a good thing. I mean, who knows what the DNC will do next? I mean, they are very corrupt, very dirty. But let's hope they...
Well, now it gets more exciting.
Yeah.
Let's finish up though here. Yeah. And like Elliot, I saw you come on.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for Adam?
Sure. Hi, Adam. It's so nice to meet you. Certainly love your work all around. Yeah, I just want to make a quick point about politics, and that's, Biden and the Democrats on social issues are, 100% in support of that. I would say that I don't know any Democratic plan, or even in the works or being dreamt of, that comes close to the kind of action that would be needed. So, while the Democrat is better in principle because of all the social issues that are important. But yeah, I just wanted to take the probability thing in a slightly different direction. One of the things I do is I have this climate casino. And one of the purposes of the casino is that it's educational for people to see odds of events and then to take their best guess. And I keep track, and the casino is a long-term fake money winner, because I always set my lines so that the people who are sort of uber doomers will predict doom faster than I think the correct line is. So there is a whole group of sort of people who are super like near-term human extinction and over the top on the other side of it. And I don't want to mention the names here, but some of them have quite a few followers on Facebook and YouTube. And so
Guy McPherson, I'll throw it out, but go ahead.
So I just wanted to know, like, what is your, where do you stand sort of on that doomer, rainbow right there? That, where would you put yourself?
Well, first off, I have to say, I am a huge supporter of yours. I appreciate you so much because I remember when I was like, why? Because I'm a, below average poker player. And I remember like saying to friends, like, we need to look at this as far as risk, reward, loss. And then you emerge. And it was really incredible because the mainstream news media, which we know at this point is a train wreck, but when you emerged, I was like, oh, here we go. I'm not a doomer. I mean, if you look at it like I have pocket twos and there's a 2 on the board, but there's also an 8-8, I'm trying to understand the risk versus the reward. And that's everything I'm doing. And what's so upsetting to me is the dismissal, the idea that, what do you mean? No one's going to have another 8. Like, what are the odds of the other person? No, that's not how it works. And then when the stakes are, if the other person has another 8, you lose your house, you lose your planet. No one is speaking in those terms. So I've always thought the doomer thing was literally, I'm going to be very curious to see where that term came from, because it really feels like something that oil company marketers would have created. And I bet you it's going to come back to that because it is nonsense. I mean, it is so not productive. And I've argued with Michael Mann. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're worried people are too alarmed about the climate? It just smells very fishy to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, but I think one of the things that may be important to you from this sort of, the information I've gathered is that at least when you sort of put people together who have the kind of climate understanding that would be comparable with the metaphor, of Don't Look Up, that group in general tends to think it's worse than it actually is. They tend to think it's happening sooner, faster. And so you see Michael Mann and Housefather and all these other people constantly fighting this battle to say, yes, it's really bad. The methane bomb is not going to go off and humans will be extinct in 5 years. No, we're not going to lose all the nuclear reactors. No, Seattle is not going to flood by 2035. They're constantly having to fight that battle too. And, I guess my perspective is to try and say, this is the line, this is where the odds are, right? And I can attach my own particular philosophy to that, but continually trying to correct back to that line.
It is.
But it's the problem is also, sorry, they can just they create a very bad image of a doomer and they call everyone they don't agree with a doomer. I think that's what makes it malevolent.
I am telling you, watch. In the next year, we're going to learn that the whole doomer meme came from big oil. It makes no logical sense that you would chastise the people that are very alarmed to this degree without some kind of push. I did a post on Michael Mann's social media account, who I've talked to plenty of times, and I believe that he really cares about this issue and is sincere. But I told him, you should look into economics, because there's a term in economics that applies to this, which is moral hazard. And I love the neutrality of that economics term, which is basically the conflict of interest. And if you are a person that is in the establishment, whether you're a scientist, a journalist, you have to look at your moral hazards. And if you're not, you're doing so, at least unconsciously on a willing level.
Yeah, you're accountable, and with the responsibility comes, you have to. I call it gross negligence. If you have the responsibility, if you have a large following, if you have a big reach, and you downplay the risks, and you call others who are communicating the data, you call them doomers, or you say they are lying. That, of course, that's gross negligence, because especially if you know that it's not true. And
well, that one I don't know if he knows or not, but
no, but it's, of course, if the data
optimism bias, I guess, that is shown in that, like, there's a small chance it might be okay. Let's focus on that. What? Wait a second. You don't do that in any other realm of life, by the way. Whether it's fire in your home, certainly any military would lose every single battle if they took that kind of attitude. But
you're also legally
the biggest
accountable.
battle we're fighting, and we just look at the happy side. I don't know.
If you're Adam, you're legally responsible. In many, if you have a company, if you're a doctor, if you're an airplane mechanic, if you ought to know what the risks are, and you're downplaying these risks, you're legally accountable for if something goes wrong. Even if something doesn't go wrong, you're still legally accountable.
Okay. Good. So thanks, Leon. We have a question. Wait, Robin, give me 1 second to set you up here. Robin, welcome to Climate Chat. What's your question for Adam? Robin, are you there? You've been waiting a long time, I know. Okay. Oh, there we go. Oh, go ahead. There you go. We see you. Go ahead.
Does that work
right now?
Okay.
Yeah, now
we hear you, Robin.
What's your question?
Oh, hi. Well, it's great to meet a legend of Hollywood, Adam. In the sort of 60s and 70s, there was a similar situation with the idiocy of the incumbency and the Cold War. And they made a wonderful film to lampoon the stupidity of mutually assured destruction, which was called Dr. Strangelove. And of course, it had a brilliant comedian in it, which was Peter Sellers. The thing about Don't Look Up, I mean, I don't want to be critical, but there were very few laughs in it. I mean, it was very hard viewing. I actually had to stop about a third of the way through. I just couldn't bear it. And I just wondered if you'd introduced some humor into it. It might have made it more palatable.
Okay.
Jesus.
What do you think, Adam?
I mean, look, man, I've been doing comedy.
It was pretty funny. I had parts, certainly.
I've been doing comedy for a long time, and comedy is very personal, and I think it should be personal. But all I would say is, if you're watching that movie and it's not making you laugh, like, if you care about climate, remember,
I do. It's awful. It was awful. Too awful to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if the two of us are gonna duel about comedy, like, I mean, how old are you?
That's none of your business.
Well, here's what I would say to you. Fuck you. And I say
Excellent.
that
I like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, dude,
Yeah,
it
excellent.
made me laugh. And it
It's
made
usually me that
huge
says that to other
amounts
people.
of audience laugh.
Okay.
It had,
Anyway,
I
thanks, Robin.
I would ask Robin to come back for our Halloween show instead. That would probably be more your speed if you're not laughing at Don't Look Up. That's my thought.
I honestly, I'm just sick of these people that are like baby consumers that are like, I didn't like it. Yeah, that's fine. Like, I remember going to see Spike Lee's Malcolm X film, and I had studied all about Malcolm X, and I walked out of the theater. I was like, well, that told me nothing new. And I was like, oh, it wasn't for me. So when I hear those kind of baby, pouty consumer opinions like that gentleman just had, I'm like, grow up, dude. First off, your sense of humor is not definitive. I can tell from 30 seconds you're not funny. And second off, think of the big picture, which is the movie was seen by 500 million people. It was #1 in 82 countries. So if you didn't like it, cool. But the idea that you lead with your kind of my passy isn't on the right side of my face kind of shit is just good Lord.
Let's pretend he meant that it's bittersweet.
Ugh.
So
I live in
okay.
America,
So,
and everyone in America is a consumer baby. So I just get sick of it. I'm like, wow, Jesus. Like, yeah.
Adam, I was going to ask you like the final question of like, what's cooking? What should we be on the lookout for? Things that you're working on.
So, obviously I have a high sense of urgency about what's going on with the climate, which relates to politically what's happening. We are currently shooting a movie in Australia that's a shark thriller movie that is all couched in climate. I have finished a script that we're in the middle of casting that's called 2C, that is a big epic climate film. And we have about 8 or 9 other projects through Hyperobject, Yellow Dot, that are all climate related. So, we're always trying to infuse the point of view that like we are the animals that are collapsing the livable climate to varying degrees in what we do.
Wow.
Will there be
By the way, I'm going to
follow-up?
mention you had
Going
me.
down all the banks.
What's that?
What was that?
Oh,
Stacey?
sorry. I loved your recent Shitty Bank, and I just wondered if if you were going to go after more of them, because I can't imagine that they're the only ones,
Oh my God. We have plenty cooked up from Yellow Dot. Yeah, Yellow Dot is really fun because it's just Stacey Robert Steele who runs it, Anna Wenger, Elijah, like Brittany. The whole team is just like the most relaxed, normal seeming people who want to attack the jugular of big oil and banking. So we have a lot coming, and you can rest assured that we will be putting out movies, TV shows, shorts, and climate is so big that there's no one way to do it. There's 500 things, different ways to do it. So anyone out there, I would just say, like, there is no one way to tell this story. do what you got to do, whether it's silly, whether it's, you know, serious, whether it's ludicrous. Do what you got to do.
Heartstring clutching, the whole thing. Yeah. Thanks.
I do want to mention that there's a link to Yellow Dot Studios in the YouTube description, as well as you can follow both Adam and Yellow Dot on Twitter X. There's links there as well. If you want to donate, there's a place on the webpage where you can donate to Yellow Dot as well, and tell your friends about it as well. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. It was really fascinating, and we got a funny joke in there in response to Leon's question, so that made it great as well. I do want to mention to everybody near the end, please subscribe, like the video so that more people, it will hit the algorithm and more people will see this. As I mentioned, a special guest this Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, a special time and date is David Keith, University of Chicago. We're going to talk about climate intervention, it's all related because we haven't acted on time. We have to go to extraordinary measures to protect the earth. And we'll talk about geoengineering and things like that. And then next Sunday at the regular time at 10 a.m., Ken Berlin, who ran the Climate Reality Project for Al Gore and now is with the Atlantic Council, climate and energy think tank. So that's that. And Adam, thanks so much. We're looking forward to your next projects. We're looking forward to the next funny, and by the way, sometimes not funny. Your weather wrap-up one's not funny, but I think quite effective videos at Yellow Dot as well. They get a lot of coverage.
Yeah.
But thanks for everything you're doing.
Dan, absolute pleasure. I love this. Thank you guys for having me on. And let's keep churning away at this discussion about how we deal with this very bizarre moment we're in.
Great. Thank you so much. And to everyone, we'll see you next time. And Leon, thanks for joining. And everyone, and Stacy, Eli, thanks to everybody. And see you this Tuesday at 9 a.m. For David Keith is the next show. Thanks. Bye-bye.